East of Jerusalem, past the last road, a mountain rises 500 meters above the Judean desert, the highest point between the city and the Dead Sea. Locals call it Jebel Muntar. Tradition calls it Mount Azazel. Its summit holds monastery ruins no one has excavated. The way up is a 4x4 track through 12 miles of jagged limestone. A forbidden text, the Book of Enoch, claims a fallen being was bound and sealed under sharp stone in a desert exactly like this one. Centuries later, another text claims a scorpion army rises from that same sealed darkness. Stand at the eastern edge of that mountain and look down. The drop is sheer. The rock underneath your boots is broken into edges sharp enough to cut a hand. From up here, you can see the Dead Sea as a flat silver line in the haze, and behind it, the hills of Moab. This is not a metaphor. This is a place you could walk to, climb, and stand on right now. And before you ever open the text that supposedly describes it, the place already carries a name attached to judgment. That name is Azazel. Most people who have heard of Azazel know him from one line in Leviticus, where a goat carrying the sins of Israel is sent into the wilderness and never comes back. Fewer people know that an entire other tradition, older and stranger, took that single line and built a geography around it. That tradition survives in a text called the Book of Enoch, preserved word for word by the Ethiopian Church. In that text, Azazel is not a goat. He is one of the Watchers, a fallen angel blamed for teaching humanity forbidden knowledge, weapons, ornamentation, and sorcery. Azazel alone gets a location. God orders the angel Raphael to bind Azazel by his hands and his feet, throw him into the darkness, split open the desert in a place named Dudael, and throw him into it. Cover him with jagged and sharp stones. Cover his face so that he cannot see the light. Hold him there until the day of judgment. Read that again, slowly, and notice what it is not. It is not a vision of heaven. It is not a parable about sin in general. It is a set of physical instructions, given in sequence, like a procedure. Bind the hands, bind the feet, open the ground, throw in the body, cover with sharp rock, cover the face. That is not how a writer usually describes a feeling. That is how a writer describes a burial. The official explanation has always been comfortable. Azazel's binding is theological. Dudael is symbolic. The darkness represents divine wrath, and the sharp stones represent the permanence of judgment. None of it, the explanation goes, is meant to point anywhere on a map, but the text gives you a route. Centuries after Enoch was written, Jewish tradition still remembered a wilderness journey connected to Azazel, recorded in careful, almost bureaucratic detail in the Mishnah. On the Day of Atonement, a goat bearing the sins of the people was led out of Jerusalem along a fixed path, broken into 10 stations, each one stocked with food and water for the escort, who would not eat or drink along the way, until the procession reached a cliff roughly 12 miles into the desert. The Mishnah calls the destination a rugged and rocky place. The goat was pushed from the edge. A man at the cliff watched for the fall, then signaled back along the line of stations until word reached the temple that the ritual was complete. The whole system depended on precision. 10 booths, 12 miles. One drop, in one place, repeated every year for centuries. Now look again at the mountain you started on. Jebel Muntar sits roughly 12 miles southeast of the Old City, on the only road that runs from Jerusalem toward the Dead Sea through that stretch of wilderness. It is the highest point in the region. Its eastern face is exactly what the Mishnah describes: rugged, rocky, a sheer drop, waiting at the end of a long walk through nothing. For centuries, Jewish tradition has pointed to this exact summit as the site of the scapegoat cliff, and the scholar who first translated the complete Book of Enoch into English, R. H. Charles, looked at that same cliff and made a claim that should unsettle you. He proposed that Dudael, the desert where Enoch says Azazel was bound, is not invented geography. It is this place, the same wilderness, the same rock, the same drop toward the same sea. Even the name itself carries a translation problem worth sitting with. Dudael has been read 2 different ways, by 2 different scholarly traditions. As a cauldron of God, evoking a pit that boils and consumes, or as a place of sharpness, evoking the jagged stone the text itself describes a few lines later. Translators still disagree on which meaning the original author intended, but notice that neither reading points towards something abstract. A cauldron is a container. Sharpness is a texture you feel under your hand. Both readings describe a physical condition, not a feeling. That identification is not settled. Other scholars have pointed elsewhere, toward the Negev, toward other wastes scattered through the Judean wilderness. No inscription on Jabal Muntar, says Dudale. No excavation has ever confirmed it. The case is built from distance, terrain, and a name that traveled through oral memory long before anyone wrote it down. But that is exactly why it should make you uneasy. The strongest physical candidate for the place where Enoch says a being was sealed under rock is a real summit, in the right desert, the right distance from Jerusalem, with the right kind of stone, and a ruined monastery on top of it that has sat untouched since the Byzantine period. Nobody has dug it up. Nobody has explained it. It is simply there, the way the text left it. Keep reading, because the desert that holds Azazel is not the only physical place Enoch describes. The text takes you further. It takes you down. In a separate vision, Enoch claims he was led to the edge of a deep abyss, one that descended, in his own words, beyond measure. Not toward the sky, not toward heaven, down. He says the place had no firmament above it and no firm ground beneath it. No water, no birds, a void, chaotic and terrible, the kind of emptiness a person only describes after standing at its edge. Inside it, 7 stars are bound together like burning mountains, punished for failing to rise at their appointed time. He gives them a sentence length, a number of years measured out like a court record, not a poetic flourish. And beyond that place, Enoch says he came to something worse. A fire that burned and blazed, a chasm cleft all the way down into the abyss itself, filled with falling columns of flame, whose size he could not measure, and whose bottom he never saw, no matter how long he looked. He does not claim to understand it. He claims only to have seen it, which is a strange thing for a man to insist on if the whole scene is supposed to be invented. Notice the verbs again. I went, I saw, I came to a place, I beheld. This is not the language of a man explaining a doctrine. This is the language of a man walking somewhere and reporting what he found, the way a surveyor reports terrain, the way a witness reports a scene to someone who was not there. A vision can stay vague forever. A vision does not usually come with direction, distance, and physical description this specific. And then the text does something stranger. It assigns a guard. One of the angels accompanying Enoch is named directly, Uriel, described as the one set over the world and over Tartarus. Stop on that word. Tartarus is not a Hebrew term. It is not native to this text's own world. It is the Greek name for the deepest pit beneath the underworld, the prison reserved for the worst offenders against the gods, a term Homer and Hesiod used long before any Jewish writer touched it. A Jewish apocalyptic author, working in Aramaic and Hebrew tradition, reaches outside his own vocabulary and borrows the one word from a foreign mythology that means exactly this: not punishment in general, but a specific, located pit beneath everything else. He does not say Uriel watches over sin. He says Uriel watches over a place, a named guardian, a named region, a boundary specific enough to need a name nobody else in his religious tradition used, borrowed from a culture his own scripture elsewhere treats as foreign and idolatrous. That is not how metaphor usually behaves. The mainstream reading still holds its ground here, and it deserves to be heard fairly. Most scholars treat the abyss, the 7 stars, and Tartarus as cosmological imagery. A Second Temple attempt to explain why evil persists by mapping it onto unseen architecture, not real geography. The fire is allegorical. The pit is allegorical. Enoch is borrowing imagery, the way every apocalyptic writer of his era borrowed imagery, stitching together Babylonian astronomy, Greek underworld geography, and Israelite prophecy into a single symbolic system built to comfort, not to map. That explanation accounts for a lot. It does not account for everything. It does not explain why, when you stand on the actual cliff that tradition has pointed to for 2,000 years, the ground beneath your feet matches the text's most specific physical detail. Jagged and sharp stones, That is not a generic desert description. Most of the Judean wilderness is soft chalk and pale dust, easy to walk, easy to dig. The eastern escarpment of Jabal Muntar is not. It is broken limestone, fractured into edges, exactly the kind of terrain a person would need to specify if they were trying to describe a place where someone could be buried under rock that would actually cut, actually hold, actually stay in place for 10,000 years. The text did not need to be that specific to make a theological point. It only needed to be that specific if someone, at some point, was describing a real cliff they had walked to. One detail like that could be coincidence. The route distance could be coincidence. The terrain could be coincidence. But you are not looking at one detail. You are looking at a named desert. A 12-mile route matching an independent ritual record kept for centuries by people with no apparent interest in Enoch's theology, a rock type matching the text's own description, a guardian angel assigned to a named boundary, and a manuscript tradition, old enough to predate most of the New Testament. The official explanation accounts for the theology. It has never fully accounted for the specificity, and the story does not stop at Enoch. It travels forward into a text most people have actually read. In the Book of Revelation, written generations later, inside the same broad world of Jewish apocalyptic imagination that produced Enoch, a fifth trumpet sounds, and a star falls from the sky, carrying a key. The key opens a shaft into the abyss. Smoke rises out of it, like smoke from a great furnace, dark enough to blot out the sun and the sky above it. And out of that smoke comes an army, locusts with the faces of men, hair like women, teeth like lions, crowned with gold, armored in iron, and carrying, at the end of each body, a tail built like a scorpion's, with a sting strong enough to torment a human being for 5 months without killing them. They are ruled by a king, the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, Apollyon, the destroyer. Notice the word again, abyss. The same word, the same concept, the same sealed darkness that Enoch already mapped centuries earlier, now reopened, now releasing something with a scorpion's weapon built directly into its body. Scholars are divided on how directly Revelation depends on Enoch's specific chapters. Some argue for direct literary borrowing, line by line. Others argue both texts are drawing from the same shared well of apocalyptic imagery circulating through Second Temple Judaism, rather than one copying the other outright. That disagreement is real, and it should stay unresolved here too. But notice the structure neither side disputes. A pit is sealed. The pit holds something dangerous. The pit can be opened again, by the right key, at the right time. And when it opens, in Revelation, what comes out does not carry vague punishment. It carries a scorpion's body. The Book of Enoch never uses the word scorpion. Be clear about that. It does not name scorpion men, anywhere, in any surviving manuscript. What it does is something arguably more disturbing. It builds the sealed, fiery, located prison that, generations later, another forbidden vision claims is the exact place scorpion-tailed beings come from when the seal finally breaks. And if you want to know why a scorpion-bodied guardian at the edge of a dark, fiery underworld felt instantly recognizable to ancient readers, you have to go back further than either text into Mesopotamian myth, more than 1,000 years before Enoch was written. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero travels to the gates of a mountain called Mashu, where the sun itself passes each night into darkness before rising again at dawn. Guarding that gate are scorpion men, beings with human heads and torsos fused to the armored, segmented bodies of scorpions, so terrifying that even a hero who is 2/3 divine falls to the ground at the sight of them. They stand exactly where myth after myth keeps placing this kind of figure, at the threshold between the world of light and a sealed realm underneath it. This is not proof that Enoch borrowed from Babylon, and it should not be sold to you as proof. It is a pattern, nothing more, nothing less. Across the ancient Near East, the boundary of a dark, fiery underworld kept needing a guardian, and that guardian kept showing up with a scorpion's body, stationed at a mountain, terrifying enough that even a king who walked among gods could not look at it without falling down. Enoch never draws that image directly, but Enoch builds the same kind of place: sealed, located, guarded, fiery, beneath the world. And it is that same kind of place that Revelation later claims breaks open and releases exactly the creature the older myths already feared, as if the shape of the threat had been waiting in the region's imagination long before either scripture gave it a verse. There is one more coincidence worth putting in front of you, and it concerns the desert itself, not the angels supposedly bound inside it. The word the Mishnah uses for the wilderness destination of the scapegoat is tsuk. That same word, tsuk, appears in an entirely different ancient document, the Copper Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in a cave near Qumran, not far from this same stretch of desert. The scroll is a list of locations, dry and procedural, nothing like Enoch's burning visions, written to record hidden treasure rather than fallen angels. But the overlap in place names sits there, unexplained, in two completely different kinds of ancient document, describing the same general stretch of wilderness, separated by genre, but not by geography. None of this proves a literal scorpion-bodied being is, or ever was, physically present on a mountain east of Jerusalem. Say that plainly, because the evidence does not stretch that far and should not be made to. What it proves is narrower, and in its own way more unsettling. The geography keeps refusing to stay symbolic, refusing to dissolve into the comfortable shape of a metaphor every time someone tries to file it away. A named desert, a named cliff, a route that matches an independent ritual record kept for centuries, a rock type that matches the text's own language, a guardian angel assigned to a foreign word for a located pit, a later forbidden text describing exactly that pit reopening and releasing a scorpion-bodied army. And underneath all of it, a real mountain with ruins on its summit that nobody has ever excavated, sitting exactly where the oldest tradition says it should. The identification is not proven. No archaeologist has put a shovel into Jabal Muntar and pulled out a name. The Dudiel question remains open, the way most of the hardest questions in this field stay open, not because no one has looked, but because the desert does not give up its names easily, and a 2,000-year-old oral tradition pointing at a cliff is not the same thing as a signed deed. But the text has not changed. The instruction in chapter 10 still says, bind him, split the desert, cover him with sharp stone, seal his face from the light. The route in the Mishnah still says 12 miles, 10 stations, a rugged cliff. The mountain southeast of Jerusalem is still the tallest thing on that horizon, still the closest match the desert has to offer, still uncut by a single excavation. Only the interpretation has moved. The interpretation now calls all of it metaphor, a story about sin and judgment with no address. The desert was never told that. It is still there, in the same place, holding the same shape the text described before anyone decided it wasn't real. Stand again at that eastern edge, where this started. The wind comes up from the drop below, carrying dust off the jagged stone. Behind you, the broken outline of a monastery no one has studied sits silent on the summit, the same ruins it has held since long before anyone thought to ask what they were built to watch over. Ahead of you, the Dead Sea catches the last light, and somewhere past it, the hills where the older myths once placed their own dark gate. Somewhere underneath this silence, by tradition, by a translator's best guess, and by a text that has not been retracted in 2,000 years, something was once bound, covered with sharp rock, and sealed away from the light to wait. The official answer says that was always only a story. The mountain has not said anything either way. It is simply still here, still unexcavated, still exactly where the desert was split open.